Привет всем! Я очень рад сообщить, что я сдал экзамен ТРКИ на третий уровень, то есть уровень C1. В этом видео я хотел бы поделиться с вами своим опытом изучения русского языка и также советами для подготовки к экзамену. Дело в том, что когда я готовился к экзамену, было трудно найти полезную информацию о этом экзамене на этот высокий уровень. Есть некоторые видео, в которых говорится о экзамене, но они не анализируют то, что надо делать, чтобы получить самое большое количество баллов. Я решил, что если я сдам экзамен, сделаю видео, в котором я поделюсь советами для подготовки к экзамену. А вот я сейчас и это делаю. Now I'm going to switch to English because I think what I'm going to say in this video is going to be interesting even for those people who may not have studied Russian for so long and who may not even be interested in taking the C1 exam. So in this video, I'm going to set the scene a bit. I'm going to talk about how long it took me to get to C1 level, whether the exam accurately reflects your level in Russian, and how this exam differs from other language exams that I have done in the past. If you want to dive more deeply into the exam itself, I'm going to post 4 other videos where I go through in detail each of the subsections of the exam and tell you all the tips that you need to get good marks. So Russian has a reputation of being a difficult language, so if you're just starting out, you're probably wondering, will I ever get to C1 level? The answer is yes, but you're going to need to be patient. So I started studying Russian seriously from September 2022, and I took the C1 exam in January this year. So you could say it took me about 3.5 years. And I think 3 years is actually a good amount to get to C1 in any language. And I should also say that I did study a bit of Russian many years ago, and I got to around A1 to A2 level. But I had forgotten everything, so I basically started from scratch again. But if you kind of consider the bit of head start that I got, then maybe you can add another 6 months to the timeline. So I would say it's realistic to aim for C1 in about 4 years. As someone who grew up under the Hong Kong education system, I'm naturally obsessed with perfecting my exam technique. So I bought basically all of the past papers that are available. So some of those are online, others you need to basically buy. Yeah, you can find various papers, although there aren't that many, I should say. Really, I cannot emphasize how important it is to be familiar with the type of questions that you're going to get in the exam, and very important to practice as well. So for example, I did a practice for the writing part of the exam, and I asked a Russian teacher to basically sort of evaluate it, and I failed the first time round. But it was really important to know that that was my weakness, and fortunately it was something that could be fixed relatively easily. But if you don't do that before the exam, you're going to find out in the actual results, which isn't ideal. So very important to know the exam and practice beforehand. I should also say that this is probably the first time that I used AI in preparing for a language exam, and I think it's been really helpful. So there is, for example, an aspect of Russian vocabulary where you have different versions of a particular verb, and they have different prefixes. And if you look at a dictionary, they will kind of give you the same word in English translation. So an example of that is with the verb lit, you get vlit, razlit, zalit. And if you look at a dictionary, they could all say to pour. And it was really helpful to use AI and basically say, can you tell me the difference between all these words and give me examples? So that was a really helpful way to prepare. There is a general debate about whether language exams accurately measure someone's linguistic ability. So what I'm going to say is not necessarily limited to Russian. But anyway, the first point I want to make is that exam technique is very important, especially because the TRKI is a very kind of rigid exam, especially for the writing and speaking bits. So I'm going to talk about that in the other videos. But what that means is that there is quite a lot of space for someone to kind of game the system and consciously give what the examiners are looking for. And that means, you might not actually have the abilities described by the Common European Framework of Languages as a C1 user and still kind of get relatively good marks in the exam. So that kind of gap is, I guess, what you can call exam technique. But that said, I think to be able to do that in the first place, you do need quite an advanced level of Russian. So I would say that it's still a very good reflection that you are operating on quite a high level in the language. The other thing I want to say is that preparing for the exam definitely improved my Russian a lot. So there are some grammatical points that I would never have come across, and now as a result of studying for the exam, I know that stuff. So I would say it also actively improved my Russian. I've done German C1 and Portuguese B2 in the past, and I noticed some quite interesting things where the Russian exam is designed differently from the exams for Western European languages. And there are both positives and negatives. So first of all, the negative thing is that the Russian exam is actually much stricter than the equivalent exams for Western European languages. So in the Russian exam, you need to get 66% in each of the 5 subtests to pass overall. And it doesn't matter how well you did in any one of the subtests. Like basically it doesn't compensate for any of the weaker tests where you may fail. There is a possibility of passing even if you fail one of the subtests, if you get between 60 to 66%, but you're only allowed to have one subtest failing in that way. Compare that with, say, German. So for the Goethe certificate, you need 60% to pass, 60% in each subsection to pass overall. And then I also checked for DELE, the Spanish exam. There is also a sub-pass mark. It's the combined score of 2 tests. So you can kind of compensate for a weaker section with a stronger section. So basically there is more leeway in the Western European languages. The thing that I actually quite like about the Russian exam is that it does explore quite a wide range of registers and styles, and I think it's wider than what I've seen in German, for example, which is kind of much more focused on like academic and formal language. So for example, in the Russian listening test, you've got like recordings of people speaking in more colloquial style or even like slang. Also in the reading test, you see journalistic texts and literary texts. So I think it's a bit more varied and actually evaluates more someone's ability to work in a range of situations. And then there is one thing that is both a positive and negative, which is something that I've already mentioned, and it's the rigidity of some of the tasks and the way it's designed, and especially in the speaking and writing tests. And when I looked at the tests in the beginning, I thought they looked very weird. So for example, in the writing test, it asked you to kind of describe the problem and then give subjective and objective reasons. And I was just like, what do you mean by subjective and objective reasons? Because in my mind, in the writing test, you should just be able to write a well-argued essay, and that's pretty much it. So that was really odd in the beginning. But then I realized that because it's so rigid, there are actually many things that you can prepare for beforehand, and actually that makes life easier as an exam candidate. So it's both a good and bad thing in the end. And in the other videos, I'm going to go into detail about how exactly you can prepare for those tasks. So that's it for this introductory video. I hope that has been interesting, even if you're not thinking of doing the exam. And if you are, then please do check out my other 4 videos where I go into detail about how you can ace the exam as well.